like video record? Oh yeah.
I do. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's perfect.
I have a YouTube
I'm glad
channel.
I kind of fluffed my hair.
It's beautiful. You look lovely.
It was up in this crazy morning bun.
I showered for this.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh, you're way ahead of me. Damn it.
So how are you?
I'm doing excellent. I'm actually in such a good place starting 2023 here. And I'm so grateful to be on your show. Thank you.
What's good about the start of 2023?
I don't know. I think it's just honestly my attitude towards winter this year as a whole. Because the days, I live in Ottawa, and the days are by December 21st, we're talking like, 6.5 hours of daylight, and just, I don't know. I just approached it that I was going to take care of myself as much as I needed to finish off 2022. And then as like the freshness, I don't know. It's impossible for me to deny that the calendar flip doesn't affect me. No, I'm not a different person, but the fresh year definitely gives me like a fresh feeling. And I was continuing to make choices that would take care of me. So for example, like I didn't drink on New Year's Eve. I went to a party, and it's my first New Year's that I went somewhere that I didn't drink. And I just didn't want to, because we had a big family gathering thing on the first, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to bed early. I didn't even wait for the ball. I went to the party. I had a great time, came home, and just like woke up on the first, totally full of energy, and did a crazy awesome workout, made good choices, and it just sort of snowballed. So I would say this January is arguably one of the most energizing, self-focused in a great way. Like I'm filling my cup, and therefore I have so much to give to the world right now. I'm feeling like I'm giving a lot, and I have a lot to give, if that makes sense.
Yes, you do. There's something to be said for not drinking on New Year's Eve. I've loved the New Year's days when I've woken up and haven't had a hangover. It just feels like such a perfect way to start the year. And it just feels like a little secret that you have no one else has or something.
Right? When it not only is the calendar flipped fresh, but like your body's fresh and your mind, it's like, oh man. And it's not to say I didn't have a great time, like in my 20s, like annihilating my body, but maybe I didn't. Maybe that wasn't the way.
Okay. So I'm super excited to talk to you about all things awakening and intuitive awareness and sort of your coaching methods. And I want to start off because you are you're a professional athlete, former.
I'm a former World Cup.
I didn't know if it's like a president where you still are, you know what I mean? Like you go.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know if it was disrespectful to say you're.
Well, I could be a World Cup champion still, because I have won. So that's good. Let's keep it coming. Keep it coming. I can be.
It was freestyle skiing, right? Skiing.
Yeah. So freestyle cool. Mogul skiing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is so cool. That is the coolest. That is the coolest thing. I never met a mogul I could handle or understand.
Well, they're really fun to watch. It's an extremely technical sport. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's like, I think in the last 4 Olympic Games, or maybe since 1998 Nagano Olympics. So I think it's actually 6 or 7 Winter Games since then. Oh my God, this is like aging me. The mogul event, freestyle events are the second event to sell out. The first event to sell out is usually the final for men's hockey.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's a hugely spectator friendly sport. It's really fun and exciting to watch. You can see basically the entire run. Like, so for Alpine's a really big skiing event for sure, but they're like cruising down the entire run. You're going to see like a tiny blip of them flying by. Whereas like freestyle events, you can like watch the whole thing. So it's really exciting for spectators. And yeah, it's I have some reluctance, even though I skied moguls for 20 years and I am considered a professional and one of the world's greatest mogul skiers. They still, think now when I'm in my 40s, I'm like, okay.
Okay, maybe I don't do the moguls
maybe
today.
I don't anymore.
I saw you on Instagram with your partner, and we were at Calabogie, I think, and it just looks so cool. You have the helmet and the goggles. It just looks so cool. I was like, God, they look like they're going to. It just looked like the people I want to be that weekend. That's what it looked like.
That's fun. Well, it does make me feel like I'm in my 20s again. So there you go.
Did you have a hard time when you finished? Like, you hear that professional athletes have a difficult time after if they haven't decided. Because I don't know, what was it like for you? Did you have aspirations after, or had you thought about after? Like, what were you? How did you end up retiring, and where were you at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, so my goal was to go to the 2006 Torino Games, and I was tracking, like, quote unquote, that's what they say. And at the time I was ranked second in Canada. They sent 4 women. And to go to the Olympics, the way that the selection criteria was that you had to qualify. And there was like 7 events or something that you could use, and you pick your top 4. So you could screw up 3 of them royally, and you could still go to the Olympic Games. You could even screw up like 4 and have 3 solid, really good results and still be in that top 4. So there was a bunch of like moving around. Going into that season, I was the second placed female. And I mean, my parents bought tickets to Italy. They got their Olympic tickets. They were there. I got my accreditation. I was sizing. I did all the media training. And in the 3 events leading in to the Olympics, I started to, quote unquote, choke. Okay. So I started to get really nervous, and I wasn't performing. It was like fluky stuff too. Like, my ski fell off on one of my runs, so I didn't get a good score. I was making these minor errors, and I was slipping. And at the last qualifying event, at that moment, I was ranked 4th. They were sending 4. And for me to hold on to that spot, I needed to get a top 12. That's a final. I needed to make the finals. Now, I make the finals all the time. I'm a finalist skier. Making the finals, I could do it kind of in my sleep. I don't want to brag, but like on an average day, I would make the finals. Mm-hmm. On a good day, I would be in the top 5 or on the podium, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm standing at the top of the course. We're in Modena, Italy. It's the last World Cup before the Olympics, and I couldn't even feel my body. Like, I was so focused on the result as opposed to the task that was in front of me that, like, I don't know, it was this extreme overwhelm. And then this little voice inside my head said, relax, you've got this. You know what to do. And I had this moment of calmness. The starter was like 3, 2, 1, go. I left the start gate and I crushed my run. I had a really solid Elisa Kurylowicz performance. I crossed the finish line and I just like started to bawl my eyes out because I was like, I'm going to the fucking Olympics. Like, this is it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the one interesting thing about freestyle skiing is that it's a judged sport. And there's no conspiracy theories around this or anything. Like, the judges didn't hate me, but I did get a couple of lower scores than what I would normally get from some of the judges who typically like my style, who like my performances, so anyways, at the end of the day, the scorecards came out and I was 13th. I needed a top 12 and I was 13th. And it was almost like this, like, Olympic dream slipping through my fingers. I did what I was supposed to do, and then it didn't happen. And then what happened after that was like sort of a blur, to be honest. Another girl who was like a rookie on the team, who had a couple of, she outperformed me on the Olympic qualifier event. So she snuck into that 4th spot. I was asked to pack my bags within an hour of returning back to the hotel. My coaches told me, the Canadian World Cup team coaches told me I needed to leave immediately, so not to influence the Olympians' attitudes negatively. So you're bummed out, get the frickin' hell out, is basically what they said. They put me on a bus. Yes, so harsh. 11 o'clock p.m., I loaded a bus with all my bags and they dropped us off at the Milan airport. And I was like, I don't have a ticket home. What the hell am I supposed to do? Okay. So in the mid 2000s, a one-way ticket, well, you didn't have electronic tickets, by the way. Remember like those old like paper ones with like it was like that, which seems crazy because I was only like 18, 17 years ago. So anyhow, I remember my one-way ticket was $2,100. I got on a flight at I had to wait in the airport all night because it wasn't even open. The poor lady who bought me my ticket was like, I was just like a disaster, probably a zombie. I was part of the zombie apocalypse at that moment. I don't even know. And then, I had to face this reality that my Olympic dreams were over. And the following 3 months, I quit the sport. Actually, I chose not to continue with the World Cups that happened after the Olympics. I was like, I was so mad at the coaching staff for how they treated me. I was so angry about how my friends on the team treated me and they didn't say bye and no one cared about me. And all I thought about was like me. When you're an athlete, you're literally trained to have this tunnel vision like nothing else. I was very selfish. I was like, I'm representing Canada. Give me what I need. Like, this is what I need. It's like this entitlement righteousness that you don't even know you have until it's gone, right? Like then it's like, oh, well, I'm just this nobody. That's kind of how it was. My coaches did not contact me for like almost 4 weeks, like almost a full month. It was really interesting it was really tough. So I went into a huge depression. I started smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, eating ramen noodles every day, vowed never to do a squat again. I started getting into like 6 packs of Smirnoff Ice every night.
Oh.
I know. So I'm 26 years old and I'm a tight 155-pound super athlete. And I punished my body so hard that within 1 year, I was 240 pounds.
Wow.
And it was this, I didn't even know that I was gaining weight. Like, I didn't even know that I was doing this. I felt like the same person in terms of like my athletic ability, because I could still like ski really well. I got into coaching. I was coaching the Ontario team. I was coaching a provincial team and I was still doing all the things, but just punishing the shit out of myself.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow.
Then one day I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person looking back for the first time. And so much time had passed. Like, I was so deep in the hole that I didn't even know how far I was. Like, I didn't even know that I was sort of at this rock bottom point. It was this very sophisticated narrative in my mind that was keeping me in denial about who I was. And then, so I looked at myself and a little voice said, what are you doing? Like, you need to help yourself here. Get your shit together, kind of thing. But it was like the most loving voice. And I immediately was like, oh my God. It was like a massive wake-up call, almost through my body, my mind, my soul, everything. And then, of course, I didn't know how the heck to get out because I was so addicted to sugar and booze and ramen and sitting on my ass. Like, I didn't want to do anything.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, It sounds like a dream just for a while, just for a while. That would be great. I'm curious about when you said the sophisticated narrative, because you had the sophisticated narrative, and this will feed into sort of like awakening, but you had that. And then you had like, what, I guess your real true self speaking to you. Like, so what did the sophisticated narrative say to keep you doing this stuff?
Oh, it was like, you're not worthy of love. You're not worthy of success. You're a failure. You're a piece of shit. You're a fat pig. Like, I mean, so it's really interesting because when I had that wake up call, it really catapulted me. And I understand that people change for many reasons. People break the spell of the narratives that they're under for many different reasons. One of which is, a specific moment or event. Sometimes it's like a slow drip too. People are like, oh, and they're seeing someone else living a different life and they start sort of slowly changing. Others like to blow up their whole lives and go. So I was a blow up my life person. And so I didn't know what to do. I had this wake up call and then I fell immediately back to sleep. So I couldn't tell you in that moment what those narratives were. I just knew that I didn't have that motivation anymore, that drive to be better like I did in that present moment, like, aha. You know how, so if you have an aha moment, you're like, oh my God, I see the world differently. And then you just fall back into your own shit and your own routines and the way you talk to yourself. You don't change it. You think you're changed, but you're not doing anything. You just had a moment and now you're back. So I was doing this like sort of wake up, seeing things differently, falling back to sleep, doing things the same. So I was kind of up and down for a little bit. And then I decided to go and see someone. So I started working with a spiritual coach, someone kind of like a life coach. It's Adele Stratton. I started seeing Adele Stratton.
You did?
Yes. So I started
that's a mother of a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's awesome. And she's blown up on Instagram as well. I see.
Yeah, she really has. So in the mid 2000s, I've been seeing her monthly or bi-monthly, depending on the time of year since then.
Wow.
I started seeing her once a week. And she started to help me understand the conditioned mind and that the things that I was telling myself are not actually me. They're not necessarily me. I'm not choosing to say the things that I'm saying. They come up automatically. And it was a long and grueling process because I was in so much denial. I thought it was woo-woo bullshit. There was not a lot of self-help stuff that was mainstream at the time. And I thought I was like kind of this crazy person going to therapy, listening to this crazy lady. And however, something inside me just kept me moving forward. Like I just kept going to see her. I kept doing the work at the bare minimum level. Like I didn't quit. And maybe that's the athletic performance side of me. Like I knew I had to do something and I didn't know what else to do. So I was doing this and I was like, whatever, like half-assing it, but I was still doing it. And so we would, for example, she had me journaling. I hate journaling. I hated it. So she said, okay, instead of journaling about your day, make a list of the things that you're saying to yourself when you hear the voice. Because oftentimes when people are super deep in their conditioned mind, and I can go into that afterwards, but when they're super deep in the egoic mind, you don't even think you think. But the human brain thinks something like 57,000 thoughts a day. And if you say to yourself, oh, I don't have a voice in my head, it's most likely because it's so suppressed. You're in such denial that it's there, that you can't hear it. Everybody has a voice. You're not special. You're not enlightened. And that's what I felt. I was like, I don't have the voice. And I thought I was this like superhuman for being so like wise, like And then I started to hear it and I was like, oh, there it is. And I started to write it down. And the things that I would say to myself were like these vile, really negative things. And I would write it down. And I did that for about a year. I was journaling my thoughts at first, and then got to go one step deeper, which is my beliefs about who I was. And I started to learn and understand how beliefs are formed, how my beliefs were formed, and that it's interesting. And that's when the waking up really started to happen on a regular basis. So do you want me to get into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I'm curious about just the conditioned mind. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because this is something I think people don't even know, is that half of the things that we think and believe about ourselves are from external places, and they're given to us and we're not choosing them. Yeah. Exactly. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, I don't know how to explain it. I've been going through this myself, but I don't know how to verbalize it, but to explain to people what it is.
Yes. So your sense of self right now, who you think you are, is a really big aspect of your life. And so what I'm about to say might sort of shadow that a little bit. I don't mean to trigger anyone, because when you wake up to the conditioned mind, it can be a really lonely and sad place, because you realize in some aspects that you have been living a lie, that things aren't actually the way that they seem. We are all wearing a lens. And one of the easiest ways for me to explain this is through religion. There are so many people that have a relationship with religion, be it extreme on all areas of the spectrum, from even atheist to being a highly religious person. Now, I, for example, grew up as a Catholic. I went to Catholic school. I had Catholic parents. I went to church every Sunday. We prayed at our bedside at night. We followed the rules of the Catholic Church. We were punished if we didn't behave at church. We were rewarded when we did. And so there's two things here. There's actually three. There's the conditioned mind, and it's formed through a human experience of domestication and through belief systems. So domestication, humans don't like to think that we're domesticated beings, because that sounds like dehumanizing to a lot of brains. It makes people think that they're a dog, because dogs are domestic, like animals. But in reality, we're animals in a lot of senses. And most humans are trained to behave in certain ways through a reward punishment system. You're a good girl. You're a bad girl. If you do this, you're a good boy. You're a bad boy. Okay. So, and the definition of good girl is different. So what my mom thought was good, with the Catholic Church as the guide, taught me things that, maybe someone in a different religion would be rewarded for. So that's sort of the first layer. Now, a great way to sort of kick you out of the subconscious and bring you into the conscious moment is to ask yourself, if you were born on the exact same day in China or India or anywhere but where you lived, do you think you would believe the same things that you do now? And the answer is no, you wouldn't. You would believe what your parents, your caretakers, your teachers, the people around you taught you. They teach you how to live your life. And of course, everyone's doing their best. We're not blaming these people. This is just generational conditioning. This is how it works. You grow up and you learn how to live your life based on how the people around you live their life. And that's your conditioning. That's your conditioned mind. So religion's a really interesting one. And it's actually one that started to break me out of this in the first place. This was before I was even an athlete. And it was when my parents got divorced. I was 12 and I was terrified, because I believed that my mom and dad were going to hell because they got divorced, because that is like a terrible sin. What's going to happen to them? And I was petrified. And as I sort of embodied that fear, I started to ask questions about myself and think critically. So a way to jump out of the conditioned mind is to actually ask questions, and because things didn't make sense. And I started thinking like, well, if God is all forgiving, why is there a hell? And we're talking like I was a teenage kid and I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. So what's happening here? And I just kept questioning and questioning and questioning. And that's where I sort of started to detach my well-being from the rules of the Catholic Church, because otherwise their rules were, I was at the mercy of that set of rules for almost my entire childhood. Yeah. Okay. So how are beliefs formed? So as we go into our beliefs, they're formed in three main ways. There are other ways for this to happen, but three main ways. The first is when authority figures tell you something. So in your formative years, when you're a kid, and I mean, scientists, they argue about what the age really is, but for the most part, it's like ages 7 to 14, give or take a few years, are your quote unquote formative years. And so in those years, if your parents are telling you something, you're creating agreements with what they're saying and believing it to be the way it is. Okay. So any authority figure, we're talking police officers. Remember when you're a kid and you look at a police officer and you're like, oh my God, and you're like scared of them. You basically, they're the ones you have to listen to. And if you don't, you're going to be a bad girl and you need that approval. So you're constantly,
Yeah.
Okay. So it's through authority figures. It's through repetition. The more often you hear something over and over again, the more likely you are to believe it, whether you even believed it in the first place or not. For example, if I started calling the sky purple instead of blue, and I over and over again started calling it purple, my 7-year-old niece, she might catch on and start calling it purple. And, my family might do it just for fun. And then it kind of grows because the more we talk about it. And then if a celebrity or authority figure started calling it purple, and then all of a sudden everyone's calling it purple, it's just kind of like these seeds that get planted. And we hear it with mainstream narratives. Fads are also a really good indication. You look at the eyebrow fads, for example, the body trends, any trends. All you need is for people to continuously repeat a narrative and you will believe it. It will become who you are, who you think you are. And it's like all you can do is to think about how you want pencil thin eyebrows, even though whatever, like you don't even know why. It's just because it's through repetition. And then the third way that beliefs are formed is through culture, through the way it always was. So you're following in the footsteps, my dad was a doctor and I want to be a firefighter, and you want to be a firefighter, but your dad was the doctor. And then you just end up being a doctor. And then you wake up and you're like, I don't want to be a doctor. And you're like, why did I do this? And it's just because it's the way it always was. There was 17 generations of doctors. There was, even to the smallest thing, like your traditions in your family, how, like, for example, like we're Polish and we have a Polish Christmas. We do like pierogies and gołąbkis and all these like really authentic Polish foods. And we do borscht and we have this thing. And when COVID hit in 2020, December of 2020, we were in full lockdown where we are, and we weren't going to have our traditional Polish gathering. And it like affected people. Like it hurt. It was hard to give that up because it's the way it always was. So I think you get the point.
Yeah. Even marriage and kids and, dating and marriage and kids, just like that pattern that everyone expects you to do, right? The elevator.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those can get a little bit more complicated because yes, it's the way things are. And you're hearing it over and over and over again. And it's what your parents did. So, okay. So you can get double and triple whammies here that really seed these deep. And if you go against that, even if it's what your true being wants, your authenticity wants, it's going to seem risky to move outside of that narrative, because that is your core belief. Even it might not be your core value. It might not be what you actually value, but it's what you believe. And then we get into dissonance of the mind, where we're battling and we don't hear the voice in our mind because we're not paying attention to it. So we're having all of the stress building up in our minds, in our bodies, because we're living a lie. We don't know we're living a lie, but we're just going in that direction because it's the way it's supposed to be. And then all these problems happen. Disease happens, stress happens, depression happens, anxiety,
It's interesting because I never got married or had kids. I would still love to, I'd still love to get married someday. I don't know. Maybe there's a part of me that just wants to put the pictures on Facebook.
Change your status.
That's hysterical to say, but like, there's still a tiny part of me that wants to go, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I realized as I've gotten older that I've been choosing along the way. Like, I've always made the choices, but I would have told you that I wasn't making the choices. Like, things weren't working out for me that way, and that I wanted it. And yeah, I wanted it, but I didn't want it at all costs. Right. And it was our mutual friend, Amber, because I was just always beating myself up about it the whole time, that I wasn't married, that I didn't have kids, even though I can tell you now at 52, like, there was not a point in time that I would have changed one single thing. I just wish I could change how hard I was on myself about it all along. But I think I was like 37, and our mutual friend, Amber, I was talking about some situation, and I think the voice that I didn't even know I had was coming out, because it was basically how there's something wrong with me. And, I just understand that there's something. That's the gist of how I was talking to her, was like, basically there's something wrong with me, and I understand there's something wrong with me. And we were in the car driving up to go skiing, and it was super quiet. And she just said, "How long have you been like this?" And it was like this total
such an Amber question.
like this total turning point in my life. Cause I was like, oh, this is not okay. Right. Like, I've just let out what's been happening in my head to someone, and they're saying it. And it was like at the start of everything different. But is that sort of,
yes.
I mean, I was getting to my 40s, and I'm noticing people go like cuckoo in their 40s. And a lot of people say it's perimenopause and it's hormones. And I think a lot of it is this too. Like, this is a piece of it that's so unaddressed.
Absolutely. We chalk it up as like a midlife crisis in a lot of ways. Like, that's something, that word that people identify with, because they're living this life and they're not fulfilled. They're doing all the things they were told to do, and life isn't satiating or fulfilling. And they feel like they're living a lie, but they can't quite put the words to it. And that's very common and very normal. And yeah, so men is a midlife crisis, females is menopause. Like, that's kind of what happens. And here's the thing. Our minds naturally don't tend to think outside the box. Society puts us in a box, because if we don't conform, then we're ousted. And especially in the polarized binary world that we're living in. I mean, it's getting worse and worse, but America, if you look at Americans, you have one of two ways of thinking. And if you don't think one of those two ways, you're ousted. You're basically like a canceled, irrelevant piece of garbage. And so like, and publicly shamed. So if you're an American who is, pro-abortion, but also pro-gun, like having guns, who are you? Like, this shameful piece of garbage. Like,
sorry, it's true. Shameful piece of garbage that you don't think in the right way about those.
Yeah. And if you don't follow all the rules of the left or all the rules of the right, you have no home. And so what happens is now I'm going to quote someone, and I don't recall who it is, but so sorry everyone, but this is not me speaking. This was a really profound quote that a friend of mine, Mark Groves, he's the Create the Love. He mentions this often, and it's the human tendency is to do one of two things, to belong and to be authentic. However, we will abandon our authenticity the moment belonging is threatened. So anytime you're with a group of people and you have a different opinion, let's just say you and your girlfriends all go to the movies and you think the movie sucks, but everyone loves it. And they're like, oh my God, as you're leaving and you're hearing all these opinions, if you said, oh, that movie was garbage, they're gonna, like, there's a risk there. You're risking belonging to that group. So you'll probably just agree. You might not say anything. You'll be like, oh yeah, it was good. I liked it, I guess. Yeah, it was okay or whatever. Like, you're going to change your expression because of the people you're around. Yeah. So yeah, like that whole expression, you are the sum of the 6 closest people or the 8 closest people. It's true. And it's interesting because when we're surrounded by people who think the same as us, who are the same as us, we call these echo chambers or constructs or however you want to modernize that existence, you'll come across people. And if it's the right time for you, if you're in that space where you sort of understand that things aren't the way they are, for example, like Amber, she's a really great person who consistently challenges the construct. Okay. She's constantly giving you feedback of thinking outside the box, in other words. So she's done that. She's been that person for me. These are our teachers that come in and will challenge you a little bit. And it's not up to them to change you. It's up to you to be like, oh, and lift the veil for that 1 second or have your aha moment. Yeah. And start to build momentum with it, however that looks like for you.
It's interesting too, because her partner, Dave, had another pivotal moment for me a couple of years later. And this is just taking in beliefs, what you're told, repetition. Journalist, I was with, the Ottawa Sun, and I was with Sun Media, and you're told, you know, when you go into journalism, you're never going to make very much money. Like, I remember going into journalism and like the Globe and Mail top columnist was making like $75,000 a year. So my belief is I'm never going to make a lot of money. You don't ask for money. You get promotions, but you don't really get raises. It's just like, you're lucky to have that job because it's such a cool job. And I came over here and my salary was much higher. I'm in the United Arab Emirates. And, I was, got a break on taxes. And for the first time in my life, I was making good money. And then I got a management job and I was making good money for the first time. But after I had it for a number of years, I was getting sort of golden handcuffs and I wanted to do other things. And I said to them, I don't know what to do. I'm never going to make any more money than this in journalism. Because they were like, are you going to come back to Canada? I said, I don't know. I'm never going to make any more money than this. And then Dave just said, well, what makes you think that?
Yeah.
Just him saying that, it wasn't in the moment that I was like, oh, that's stupid. It was like 3 weeks later, I just thought about it over and over and over. He was completely right. I ended up freelancing and making more money. That was just some limit I had in my brain. But these little people come and they're like, it's interesting that they're a couple, but I've had those other things. And then the more you surround yourself with people, then the faster it goes, right? Like that's sort of what I found in COVID, because my friend group has completely changed and I have completely changed. So this thing about if people are listening and they're like, oh, I've had a few of these, like, how do you accelerate it? Like people can work with you, but how do they sort of accelerate it?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to those formative years and paying attention to your thoughts and your beliefs, really sitting. And if you don't hear thoughts and beliefs, I really highly recommend doing breath work or meditation or something where it's quiet, because the more you can quiet yourself, the more space you're going to give yourself to hear the voices that come up, to hear things. I mean, oftentimes, especially with hustle culture right now, with high pressure, high stress, we constantly have to be obsessed with working, distracting ourselves with our phones. Phones are a huge, massive distraction, pulling you away from listening to the mind. So let me just go back in the this is an example. In your formative years, if you had a parent like me who came from scarcity. I mean, my grandparents were in Nazi occupied Germany, in concentration camps at age 6, 7, 8. And then we're in, like they were in the war. I'm a first generation Canadian. So my grandmother, think about what she learned when she was 7 in those concentration camps. She taught that to my mom. My mom taught that to me, that everyone's doing their best. There's no blame or shame or anything. But one of the things was the scarcity food mindset. So it was eat everything off your plate. That was sort of the rule. And I know many people listening probably had a very similar experience. And if we didn't eat, we got the whole, there are starving kids in Africa story. And this is exactly coming from my grandmother. She was in Africa. Once the war was over, they trained them to Africa where she lived in I think it was Kenya or something for 6 years into her teenage years. She didn't go to school. She didn't I think she has like a grade 5 education. She literally was in Africa watching the starving kids. So that's where that story comes from. Yeah. And however, I felt bad for not eating my whole plate. Okay. So when you're a child, you're hearing your parents' voice, whatever it is, eat your plate, or don't eat that, you'll be fat, or, whatever the rules are around food. So I'm a kid, I'm absorbing all of this through repetition, through example, through all these things. And as I grow up and my brain starts to form and I'm starting to develop all aspects of my brain, because our brains are not fully formed until we're like, 20, 24, somewhere around that, depending if you're male or female. And in my 20s, that voice that was my mother's now becomes my voice. And I say, don't eat that, you'll be fat. Or eat, if I go to someone's house and I'm stuffed, but the rule was they made you that food, you eat it all, respect them by eating it all, those types of things. So I would overeat and avoid, and I would disconnect from my hunger cues or my fullness cues and who I actually am to appease someone else. Right. So that narrative isn't mine. That's the conditioned mind. That is how and that goes for everything you think you know. You don't have original thoughts. Everything you think you know has been told to you, shown to you, expressed to you, whether it's through the movies. And that's why like a lot of kids shouldn't be watching adult content, because over time, they're going to start to they're making their beliefs, they're in their formative years. So it's like, you want to be careful to censor them a little bit, but also just be aware that this is the voices they're hearing right now will become their voice. They will think that it's them thinking. They will think that those words, those are their truth. Exactly. So that's how your truth, quote unquote, or beliefs are formed. It's through all that shit. So going back to your original question, how do you fast track it? Well, first you have to really sit and break the spell and understand and ask yourself things like, does everyone in the world think this about me? Does every single human being in the world think that if you get divorced, you're going to hell? And start bringing what's unconscious into the conscious. Another way is to pay attention to the emotions. So what we do, our brains are really sophisticated, and this has to do with the sophisticated narratives as well, but it's also in the day-to-day choices that we make. We make, 21,000 decisions in a day. And most people will be like, I don't make that many. Well, you do. I'm sorry, but you are constantly choosing unconsciously. For example, when you brush your teeth in the morning, I can bet 9 out of 10 people, or maybe 9.9 out of 10 people, will probably put the toothpaste on the same way. They'll probably start on the same side, do the same brushes, like as adults. Maybe if you're a kid, you'll do things differently. You'll wake up in the morning, you'll walk to the bathroom at around the same speed, you'll do the same things in the bathroom, then you're going to go turn your coffee on, then you're going to go in the shower, you'll wash your body in the same direction. Like, you have these habits and patterns that you have. And You're choosing to do that, but it's automated. Okay. So the way you turn your car on, the way you drive to work, the route you take, those are all choices that you're making, but you're not consciously making them. The brain has automated them, and the brain automates them. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing to have automations. It would be extraordinarily time consuming and take up so much energy if you had to consciously choose to blink every time, or to put one foot in front of the other, or how wide your step's going to be. If you need to walk a little faster, you just think, oh, I'm late. And then your body starts to make choices to make you fat, like to make you on time, right? Like you don't consciously choose that. You just start going faster. So our emotions are the same. The automated emotions are the same. And so when we are kids and we're suppressing things, for example, the good girl conditioning is a really good example, because I think a lot of women can really relate to it. And one of the good girl rules is don't be angry, be polite, be nice to be accepted, right? So if something really pisses you off when you're 8 years old, are you allowed to be mad? Probably not. You have to eat it. You have to suppress it. So as you get older, think about the last time, I like using this example. Think about the last time you had an argument with someone, or you were triggered, like you're on Twitter and you read something and it totally makes your blood boil. Those moments, you're not choosing to be angry. It's just coming up automatically. You're automatically feeling mad, and then you automatically start to defend. You go into fight or flight, in other words, or fawn. So you're going to defend, you're going to yell at your phone, you're going to cancel someone, you're going to unfollow, you're going to, like a series of things will happen without you even being aware of it. You're just going to go into your default setting, is what I like to call it, which I know sounds so like, I don't know, unhuman, but you are a supercomputer and you're going to default. And the same thing happens when something great happens. If someone brought flowers and gave you $1,000 at your front door, you're going to feel something. It's going to come up. You're not going to consciously choose, oh, flowers are here unexpectedly. Oh, I just got $1,000. Cue excitement, cue happiness. It doesn't happen. It just comes up. So part of getting through some of the difficult emotions is to notice them coming up. This is how you get out of it. Going back to your original question. Sorry, this is like a 5-hour explanation.
I like it.
It's like, okay, so in my specific life, I can really only speak to my experience at this level is, so I was in an abusive relationship. I was attracting men. I was attracting friends, people into my life that were at par with how I treated myself. Because after the Olympic Games, I told you, I totally punished the shit out of myself. I had an awful narrative. I didn't know this at the time. And then, so I attracted this man who abused me equal to the amount I abused myself. And it was horrible. But that's what I felt like I deserved. And I tried to fix him and I tried to make it better. And I was focusing on him and all that shit. And I wasn't focusing on healing myself. I was focusing on healing him. I was trying to control. I was so out of control. I was trying to control everyone in my life, which I think I'm hoping light bulbs are blasting in everyone listening. So, when I started working with Adele, she was like, notice the anger. So I was noticing. He would walk in the room and I would get angry. Like that's where it came. Like he didn't even have to say anything. And I'd just be like, or he could come in. Here's the thing. Most people, I believe, have some intuitive awareness in them, meaning intuitive awareness is to observe the mind, to observe your state of being without judgment. In many ways, you can sort of relate it to when you are thinking, when you are saying things to yourself, who is listening? Okay. So who's the listener? Who are you actually speaking to? What is that entity inside of your body? This is just getting you thinking here. Like, okay, well, I'm constantly thinking 57,000 thoughts a day. Who am I talking to?
Yeah.
Are you your mind? Are you your body? Are you your soul? Well, you're all three of those things. You're the life force. You have a body, and people identify with their body and think they are their body, which is very normal. But let's just say I cut off your leg. What's your leg? Is that you? Right?
Yeah.
So it is, but it's not. You're somewhere. A lot of people really believe that who they are is someplace behind their face.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing, if you had a lobotomy, if you're brain damaged, are you who you are? People, they have these ideas of who they think they are. So going back, my idea of who I was subconsciously controlling everything. Sorry, I just went on a super huge tangent, and I'm going to try and pull this back in.
Okay.
I'm like, oh my God, where am I going? But like my ex-husband, for example, he ended up being a super humongous teacher in my life because I was able to notice who I was speaking to. So I was becoming intuitively aware, which is to observe the mind without judgment. So when he would walk into the room and I would get pissed, I would notice like the anger or the frustration, and then the thoughts that followed. So what would happen was I would get angry that he was angry. And then I tried to make it better for him instead of trying to make it better for me. So my good girl conditioning came in, and I would try and make him better. So I'd focus on him instead of focusing on me. Yeah. And where I was going before is most people, I'm pretty sure everyone listening has like walked into a room where something really bad has happened, and you can like feel the energy of the room. You're like, oh, have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, a bunch of times. Yeah.
Or you walk in and someone's like has really good news, and you're like, what just happened? Like, I want a part of this. Like,
Yeah.
So we all kind of have like that sixth sense. And as we are being domesticated, we are being conditioned to not tap into that sixth sense, to ignore it. That's, we can also call it our gut instinct, our gut feeling. So women specifically, especially those in the good girl who are trying to be good housewives, who are trying to do all the things now, careers, kids, have a really nice house, be perfect or whatever. Your gut's talking all the time, and you're shoving down all this bullshit to try to like not be authentic and not step into your power, or else you will be, you won't belong. So that's the whole belonging, authentic, right? So it goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
And sorry, we're afraid to change because we think our partner, for the most part, or the people in our lives won't accept us for that. If I change, maybe I'll get divorced. And divorced is a hard no because of my religious beliefs. So I have to stay here or else I'm going to hell or whatever. Like there's so many layers. And that's what I mean by complex narratives. If you aren't moving forward, if you aren't able to shift or change, you probably have a very, very good reason not to. And there's so many layers to it.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't have to be an abusive partner. It can just be a partner that you've, so many couples reach that point where they stop talking about things and to get to that conversation where they start touching that basement of things they haven't talked about for 5, 10, 15 years is like, what if I do that? What will happen? And I think so many women in their 40s, so many people in their 40s, they're facing things like that, right? Like relationships that could go either way. And if it's not religion that you're scared of, it's just other people, what they'll think. Like, I don't know a relationship that I've ended that my primary thought hasn't been, what will people think? Like she's a
Oh,
loser
yeah.
who can't make a relationship work. Like that's the number one thing in my head when I'm thinking of breaking up with someone is
Yeah.
that some Sue over, I don't know where, is going to say, oh my God, Amory's breaking up with another guy. Who like,
I know.
who cares? Like when I've heard people breaking up, I've literally never thought that. Like usually I think, oh, that's good. Or wow, that like you think for 1 second I've thought about it and then it's over. The thought that you would stay in a relationship or not make changes because of that is so crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. And everyone that has that has been conditioned at some point in their life to not express themselves, to worry about what the other people think instead of them, because they have to be a good girl to belong. And why aren't you a good communicator in your relationship? It's probably because every time you expressed yourself in true form as a child, you were told that that was not right. And of course that's going to translate. And of course you're going to think it's your fault. And it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. However, once you wake up to the conditioned mind, now is how you take responsibility. So many times people feel like taking responsibility for yourself is to take responsibility for everything that's happened to you. And it's like, no, if you had a really traumatic experience, that was not your fault. If something really awful, like grief and shame and like hard things happen to us. And they're not our fault. We internalize it and make it our fault. That's not what I'm saying. Taking responsibility is not about whose fault it is. It's about choice. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with that shit now? Like, how are you going to show up for yourself from now on? Like, how are you going to comfort that version of you, that 7-year-old kid who was smacked around or spit on or told that whatever? How are you going to show up from that person? And then you go into shadow work and inner child work, and all of that leads to like the therapies and the tools you can use to move yourself out of it. But I believe it all really begins at that intuitive awareness level where you start to pay attention to the narratives and start to pay attention to narratives you gravitate towards and why you do it. I don't mean to like get political here, but if you are in an ideology, for example, I'll use woke. I'm just going to use woke because that's something that's really big and growing a lot of steam. Woke to me is just an ideology. It's just a way to abandon your authenticity in order to belong. You like it as something that started off as such a beautiful movement with so much good intention behind it. Now, like if you're in a position where the things you believe, other people, so that's what I mean by religion, because religion's other people. If you're not with us, you're against us. You're over there, you're outside the group. That is not awake.
Yeah.
When you become awake to the conditioned mind, you will no longer other. You will see everyone as one. You will see everyone as part of the spirit and the flow of the universe. You will have you will not have the same, you will not take their opinion personally because you know it's not about you. They're in their bubble.
Stuff. Yeah.
Okay? They're in their stuff. So ideologies, political points of view, when you even if you look at like even sports and people's attachment to sport ideologies, like there are people in the world who, you know, would get tickets to the Super Bowl and be like, ooh, I like those uniforms better. Ooh, their butts look cuter in those pants. Okay. Oh, this is fun because Prince is performing or whatever. Okay. And then there are those who are like diehard fanatics that if their team, like they're so narrow, tunnel visioned that if their team loses, they will walk away feeling like a loser. They will walk away feeling that they have been defeated, that they are a failure because of a result of a sports team, because they've attached who they are to that. Okay. So people even end their own lives around sporting events because they feel like life is no longer worth living And it's so interesting to sort of put that into perspective and really zoom out and be like, holy shit, where did I learn this? And why do I continue to put my energy? Once you can put space between yourself and your thought in that space, this is what intuitive awareness is, you will see choice. I can continue down the default setting, or I can do something else.
Yeah. Well, since you say that about the whole woke thing, when I started, I was very nervous, and I had some people giving me a hard time because I wasn't generic enough I was still using she sometimes and woman, because I hadn't made a decision, and I hadn't anticipated that kind of a reaction. I wasn't prepared for it. And since I've just decided that the world isn't going to be better if I feel shame, that a lot of wokeness is only will a certain group of people feel better if you feel ashamed of yourself. And that's just a losing game. And once I realized that, it's I'm just going to be over here doing my best, being as inclusive as I can, but I can't be ashamed and I can't feel bad all the time, because I've gotten to I don't want to do that. That's one thing that I've realized. Because there's a group of people that just want you to feel bad, and they're not going to be happy until other people feel bad, because I guess they feel bad. That's very simplistic. But that's navigating social media. That's where I've gotten to, and I haven't had any issues since I got to that point, right? Since I stopped being scared and worrying that I'm going to make this group mad, and just sort of did my own thing. I don't know.
Well, it's a really good point. And having empathy for people is part of the awareness. When you start to wake up to the conditioned mind, you will have empathy. You will see the suffering of the world, the senseless suffering, all through ideologies. Slavery was an ideology. It was white people who thought they were better, and they created an other. They othered Black people and made them, they had to dehumanize. There's a whole psychological flow that, and people that are in those ideologies will justify that their way is right. And that's how wars are started. That's how religions would fight each other, like the Protestants and the Catholics. They murdered each other because of how they thought. And the woke movement, it's really interesting when you get stuck in that. Yes, oppression has happened. The Black Lives Matter movement is very, very important. And I believe that's how woke began. I don't know the origins of it, so sorry if I'm misquoting people. I don't want to I'm not an expert at that, I will say. And now if you, when people are stuck in narratives and in that conditioning, people's minds are being conditioned. That's what group think is. Group think is a real thing. You will start to think the same way as the people you're around. And unless you have a diverse narrative around you, you will become binary. There will be your way or no way. And if you're in that space where you can't even hear or accept a certain person in the room, that is a huge indication that your mind is highly hijacked by a narrative. It's not who you are. It's just the sum of the people around you, the repetition, and the way that the movement is going, the momentum it's building. Is it wrong? No, you're allowed to think how you want to think. That's the thing. Once you wake up to that, and you start to notice the ways the people speak around you, and if you start to question, critical thinking is a massive part of waking up. It's awareness, it's critical thinking, it's setting boundaries for yourself, and having compassion. Compassion is a huge piece. The moment you start to other someone and you start to cancel them or hate them for who they are, then that is not awareness. You are not aware. You are awake. You are asleep. You are in your conditioned mind. Period.
You're acting like you are. So, but you don't know it. And so, okay. So this is why when I decided to do this menopause, midlife, I'm there's just so much here, because there's all of this, right? There's all of this.
Yes.
and sort of your call to figuring this out. And I think it does happen to a lot of people in their 40s. And then some people go back to sleep, right? Like I think there's a wake and then they go back to sleep. I think they and then I feel like this is the time where it's a little bit now or never. I know it can always happen, but something that I see in the menopause conversation, it's become even more polarized than when I entered it. And so what I see now is this is like a mind, body, spiritual soul shift. I can feel myself. I'm 52. I can feel myself lifting in so many ways, right?
Yes.
But I see it being simplified and reduced to you've hit a wall and you need hormone therapy. And that's the end of the conversation. And because of, I mean, I know where that's coming from.
Where is it coming from?
Straight from pharmaceutical companies. Someone's going to say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I've been in and out of covering this for years. It's coming straight. It's messaging coming straight. And it's so palatable, right? Because if I go on hormone therapy, and I'm not saying, again, I have to say, I'm not against hormone therapy. Like you always have to say but totally. Right? Like you can't, I'm not against hormone therapy, but if you're sold that is the problem and the answer, that of course you're going to want it, because then you don't have to wake up and you don't have to address your relationship and you don't have to address your adverse childhood experiences. And maybe you don't even have to address your gut microbiome or whatever it is that's making you feel, or you don't have to find out what that voice is. And it's just getting so polarized within it. Like I lose my way. I know how I feel about it. But when you talk about the repetition, I'm in and out of social media, sharing, whatever, I start to lose my way. And I start thinking, like, I really do need to. And then I get confused and I'm like, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I saying the wrong thing? And then I'll just come across it always seems like I come across like a strong woman at a certain time. Like yesterday, there was this like shamanic goddess woman from Australia. And she's like, I just need to say something. Like menopause is not a devil that just turns up at your door. Like this is a normal transition and you have things that need to be attended to and you ignore them at your peril. And then I was reading the comments and of course there was a woman, like, it's very triggering as a person who's on HRT for you to say like, there's things you need to, because that woman was hearing, I'm not addressing what I need to address because I went on hormone therapy. And none of that is true. It's just, I feel like this is such a pivotal time for figuring this all out. It's like a soup.
You made some really great points in there. And one of them is, if you think about menopause, if you think about your body, you've lived your life, you're aging, you have all of the anti-aging narratives coming in all the time, the beauty culture, the whatever, the whole independent woman narrative too is like, I can do everything. And then you hit menopause. And let's just say you randomly get a hot flash, or you randomly have, what's a main symptom? I don't know, like
sleep problems
or your period changed for the first time or something, right? That's kind of where I'm at. So my period's changing and I'm like, fuck, it kind of wakes you up. It kind of brings you out of the default that you've just been living your life the way you always live it. So yes, this time is a big wake up call for women because, however, oftentimes we start to default into this. I am old. I am bad. This is, because that's menopause has been branded over all the years as like, oh, well, you're not fertile anymore. What's the use of a woman? See you later. Next, bring in the young babes with the big boobs and the whatever. Like
husband's going to leave you.
Yeah.
75% of marriages are initiated by women. Like that's not even, we've been hearing that our whole lives. Like that's something I grew up hearing. The men like young women, they're going to leave you. You're going to, like, even when I would think of being single and the older I would get, I'd be like, okay, there will always be like an older man you can date. I would actually say that to myself. Like I broke up with someone when I was 44 and I saw this old geezer in my apartment building. And I was like, well, there'll always be an older man. Like it's ridiculous. But we're sold it's embedded in us. So when your period changes for the first time and you're around the age, it's very easy to be like, no.
And that voice that comes in that says, oh shit, that's not you. That is that's an old story that you're pulling from the tree of all the thoughts that have been suppressed, and unexpressed emotion is coming up. It's not who you are.
Right.
So, okay. And then you made another really good point about who you're hearing things from. And that's that whole repetition thing. Pharmaceutical companies obviously have a lot to benefit from if you take their therapies. Is it the right thing for you? Maybe it is. Is it completely not the right thing for you? Maybe it is. However, that is where you need to start to, in the practice of intuitive awareness, you would start to question that. And you said sometimes you get lost. That is a really high level of awareness. When you actually can admit that you're getting confused and that you're getting like lost, that's big. That's really good.
Okay, good.
It's a really confusing, and like you feel weird because no one really talks about that space. No one tells you what to do in that space. And most likely you're going to do what you've learned to do, and in most cases, just keep watching and waiting for someone to change your mind. Yeah. And you can also, that's where sitting in silence, and you can call it meditation, you can call it whatever it is, sitting in silence and tuning in to what feels best for you, that gut instinct, the feeling, the story that does not speak in words. The ego is going to be the yep, 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 yep. The soul, your instinct is going to not speak in words. And if you really want to connect to that, you go on a magic mushroom journey, and you will, like, you're going to connect to that part of you that does not speak in words, and you will just know. Anyways, we don't have to go down there, but anyway.
No, it's fine. We can, I did mushrooms when I was in Canada. I was in Quebec. Yeah. At a cottage. It wasn't like a medicinal thing. We just took them. And I feel that had a profound effect on me. I can't really tell you how. It was just like that weekend change sort of shifted something in me. I felt wonderful. Yeah.
Well, things like psilocybin, what they actually do in the brain is they create new neurological pathways. So your brain is in automation. It's it doesn't have to think anymore. It just goes da, 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 da. It's like you're just doing things on default all the time. So when you take something like magic mushrooms, it's actually creating new neurons and new synapses in the brain. So you will expand out, you will see things a little bit differently. It might not be instantaneous, and it depends on the dose. So like microdosing, that's how microdosing really helps. Now, I am not a psilocybin expert. I do partner with a company. I do partner with people. I do work with it. This is only in the last year. I am not like an expert whatsoever, but I have done a macro dose, which completely changed me. So I was like, there's like Elisa before psilocybin, and there's Elisa after psilocybin. I'm changed. It's different.
Okay. So I'm not imagining it
you are not imagining it whatsoever. It's a super great therapy, and I highly recommend people investigate it a little bit. But that's the thing. So many of us have this conditioned belief, especially if you're like an 80s baby with a 90s campaign, like this is your brain on drugs. And it's like a fried egg. And then this, and drugs are so hated. And if you're a person who accepts cigarette smoke, but not smoking weed, which is natural from the ground, but you will accept cigarette smoke, think about that for a second.
Yeah.
If you are someone who accepts like massive antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, but not psilocybin, think about why you think that way. Who's controlling your narrative? How have you been pulled to that camp? And how are you?
Sorry to interrupt. Alcohol. Yes. Like I haven't drank since October because I'm trying to heal some health problems, but also I really like it. I gotta say, like, and I'm a party girl from way back, but it's changing my life. But boy, do you notice the booze on television and in films. It is,
oh my God, I know,
starring character in every single television. No wonder people drink. I mean, it's just in every single, it's another character. It's crazy. You're not making a decision to drink half the time. You're, I remember Olivia Pope on Scandal with her popcorn and her glass of red wine. Like, I started having like popcorn and wine. Like I'm so embarrassed.
I did too.
Normal.
I loved her. I wanted to be her.
Yeah,
that was
I
like
know.
one
She
of the
was
best
really
shows
cool.
ever.
Yeah.
I know. I did the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like cool to have popcorn for dinner instead of a well-nourished meal and like chug back a bottle of wine. Like I've gone, yeah, you're absolutely correct in the narratives around alcohol. And alcohol is funny too, because the second you step out of that silo, people, especially as women, are you pregnant?
Yeah.
You know, are you an alcoholic? Why aren't you drinking? Have a drink. Why aren't you drinking? And you
I
get,
don't even like to say it. I don't even like to say it because I guess of my own beliefs I had about, because I really liked drinking. And so when other people would be like, oh, I'm not drinking, I would even be sort of like, oh, they're going to be lame. Like maybe I'll just stay over here. Like that's the non-drinking part of the, you know, like I have my own beliefs about what people who don't drink are like. So I'm having to grapple with it. But well, it's super interesting to talk to you about all this. And so I could talk to you all day, but just to sort of wrap up a little bit. Are you said your periods are changing. Are you noticing any like emotional changes, or are you having any sort of like symptoms? How are you dealing with that?
It's a really good question. So I'm actually trying to get pregnant. So, and I have been for over a year and a half now. We started in May of 2021. So almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're almost May 2023. Oh my God. Anyhow, I was at a point in my life where I was single. I like got out of my abusive marriage and then blah, 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 blah. Had my growth journey, started learning how to practice intuitive awareness, started like getting wherever. And I had a moment, it was like an egg timer moment where I was conditioned to be a mother. I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have kids like in my teenage years, but I was competing for Canada and I was like planning my babies and how I was going to, whatever. And I had like a bing moment where I was like, I don't need kids to be complete as a woman. And I kind of broke that wall and stepped out of that box and felt really good and started to really focus on myself and healing the wounds of the inner child. So meeting Michael, having this like amazing relationship with a man who I have never loved myself this much. And he's a reflection of the way I treat myself, which has been so amazing. I can see him being a great dad. We've decided we want to have kids. It wasn't because I've talked to people before saying like, I don't really want kids, but it wasn't that I don't want kids. It was just that I was okay not having them. So this has been a really interesting shift psychologically for me, because now I'm like, okay, let's have a freaking baby. And it's not happening. So we went through fertility through the Ottawa Fertility Clinic. We just finished all of our testing. We got our results just before Christmas. And now we're in the phase of deciding what to do. So both of us are fertile. And we have what's considered unexplained infertility. And I asked her if I was in menopause, and I'm going to mess this up because I don't remember the actual test. She said my something levels were borderline. I don't know what those levels are.
It's probably follicle stimulating hormone. That's usually what they,
FSH.
Yeah.
Yes. So my FSH was at 10. And I was like, well, what's normal? And she was like, 9 or under is normal. Okay. So I'm 10. So I'm actually above normal. Like I'm borderline.
Yeah, those are the ones that rise as you go. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
It doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. It just means a little bit. Yeah.
But it does.
It wasn't me. Like I'm a doctor. Like doesn't mean. No, but women get pregnant in perimenopause all the time. So you can actually get surges of hormones in perimenopause that can actually, I've heard, make it easier to get pregnant at certain times. So
I've heard that too. And Michael's mom, actually, she had twins. Like Michael's a twin. She was 40 when she had the twin boys. They basically said, if we don't get pregnant, it's because of my age. And I sat with that, and that was hard for me. And I was like, oh, so I'm the problem and my age is the problem. And I brought this to Adele, my spiritual coach, and she said something really interesting. And maybe this is true, maybe it's not, but it took me out of my automated feeling of being the problem, unworthy, inadequate. And she said, if the vast majority of women were trying to get pregnant in their 40s and not their 20s, we would have very different statistics. Statistically, she's telling me that my age is the problem. But how do we actually know that? Because most women get pregnant earlier in life. There are a lot of women, if you actually start talking about it, they're having babies in their late 30s and in their 40s. Yes. In fact, I just by talking about it on Instagram a little bit, I have like 5 or 6 women in the exact same boat as me, but are pregnant. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So like, how is it that all of these women are out there talking, but my doctor's saying I have a 2.3% chance of getting pregnant?
I mean, come on. That's it's not helping anything, is it? It's certainly not making your body think that you can get pregnant if you believe having I hate that sort of thing. I think you're going to get pregnant.
Well, and if I do, and if I like, I guess the point is that you asked if I'm like feeling things, like how things are going. And every now, my body is shifting 100%. It's interesting too. My sister went into menopause at 37, my mom at 40. So we have early onset. Yeah. My sister hasn't had she lost her period at 37 years old.
This is tough for you though. Like this is a tough situation. This is hard, right? Like you've decided you want this, you've got you've got some symptoms. Like that's some mental hurdles for you. Yeah. Do you believe that your challenge, like the challenges that are, you're meant to go through this? Did you have that? Yeah.
I have no doubt.
Always, but
at this point, I have no doubt that this is a journey. Sure. I do I'm not this like enlightened, I do have mastery. I do have a level of mastery in myself. And I like to explain that in like knowledge versus knowing. People think that they can read a self-help book and be changed. They think that they can read and listen to podcasts like this one and have all these aha moments and be changed. But that's like, you could read all the books on how to swim, but if you've never swam before, and you get pushed into the deep water, what's going to happen? Yeah. Like you got a 50, like you have to do the work. You need to do what the knowledge is for you to get what I call your knowing. That's how you develop the knowing. It's through doing it. So knowledge is not the same as knowing. And now, like through this, I have a knowing that things are happening for me to bring me to a different level of my life. And they're testing me, they're teaching me. That's what the teachers, like Amber is a really good teacher because she pulls you out of the subconscious narrative for 1 second, just to show you. People like that are showing up in my life all the time. And I allow people in my life that push me back into boxes. So I definitely go in and out. The difference in the mastery of awareness is that you aren't in that box for very long. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people might trigger you and your whole day is ruined. Your week, you're driving in your car the week later saying, I should have said that to that person. Next time I see her, I'm going to blast her with blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like you are attached to that experience.
It's not like this stops happening if you do this work, right? Like, it's not like this doesn't.
Yeah. It happens. And you can see it happening and then let it go. You can let that energy move through you because it's not yours. It never was. And the more you practice, the more you can sit in hard situations. Like people can go through really hard things and come out stronger. I like the Sinead O'Connor. I think it's Sinead O'Connor. She said she had some hard stuff happening. And she said something like the media and the haters buried me under a mile of dirt. But what they did not know was that I was a seed. Okay. And she grew out of it. And I was like, oh shit, that's a really good intuitive awareness quote or analogy, because that's what it is. It's like, it's going to happen. How long do you want to hold that? How long do you need to hold on to that to identify with it, to let it control you, those types of things?
Well, I hope it happens for you, but I also know that it will be okay either way if it doesn't.
Yeah.
I also know that you look so much like Brooke Logan from The Bold and the Beautiful. Did people tell you that?
Never. her. Oh my God. I want to go Google her. I don't even know who that is.
You didn't watch The Bold and the Beautiful?
No, I was a Days of Our Lives junkie.
Okay. It was either or, wasn't it? It was either Days of Our Lives or,
Yep.
yeah, because we're on at the same time.
Yeah.
You look like young, beautiful. She's a little bit older now, but yeah, you like just about 5 minutes ago, I was like, oh my God. I hope you're not. I love it. Someone told me I look like Winona Judd and I was horrified. So I refrain usually from telling people that they look like other people. It can backfire. Okay. Where do people find you? Like if someone wants to work with you, if someone wants to follow?
Yeah. So interestingly, well, you can follow me on Instagram at Elisa Kurylowicz. I have a crazy Polish last name. It's really hard to spell. So you can also find me on my website, which is Elisa, ELISA, unfilteredcoaching.com. It's Elisa unfilteredcoaching.com. All of my offerings are there. And in fact, I basically have a 3-part program to learn intuitive awareness. It's part 1 is the awakening. Part 2 is the knowing. So it's like the learning, and part 3 is the doing. So you go through this journey of getting out of your subconscious, healing things, seeing things through a different perspective. And right now, for people that are reluctant to invest in mental health because it's like a stigma, it's hard. It's hard to say, I want to do this. I'm giving part 1. There's a promotion for the part 1 of that program, and it's $47 right now. So it's super approachable way to get in and have a little bit of a wake up call. So you can go through the awakening for $47 right now at elisaunfilteredcoaching.com. And then of course, Instagram at Elisa Kurylowicz.
Okay. Well, you're doing very important work and I appreciate you talking to me about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was so fun.
Okay. Appreciate that.